And just do a little quick introduction. Super excited that we have Kevin Dorsey here with us, who's founder of Inside Sales Excellence, and our very own Nick DeSimone, who is a sales development manager here at Orum, who's actually going to be leading this session. So I'm going to hand it off to you, Nick. Thanks for being here.
All righty. Thank you so much, Laura, and pleasure to be here. Excited for a fruitful conversation. A little more about myself, because I know I'm not KD here, pretty new to the game. So I've been in sales for a little over 5 years now. And though I have journeyed through companies, big and small, public giants, Series B and D startups, and I've stayed pretty loyal to selling within the AI, SaaS space. And the calling cultures specifically at each org have been vastly different in their own way. And I've learned a lot, good and bad, from each of them. But my last 6 months here at Orum, managing the sales dev team, has really opened my eyes to what an effective calling culture is supposed to look like. And for those unfamiliar, we use our live conversation platform, every single day. So we use what we sell. It's a big part of having, our calling culture. And I'm just excited to share some insights and excited to have Kevin Dorsey, KD himself, along for the ride. Thanks for taking the time to be here. Welcome.
Let's go, my man. Long time coming. So I'm pumped for this one. I see some familiar names in the crowd, so to speak. So excited to dive in. It should be good.
Awesome. All right, well, let's do it. Requires no introduction. And the fact that, both of us are still practitioners, right? And close to the ground on a lot of these topics is going to help us to speak to the raw, genuine truths of what it takes to establish a true calling culture. And so let's set the stage here, right? Cold calling. It's been a hot topic the last few years. Is cold calling dead? Is social selling now the number one answer? Or is it uber personalized emails? To dial or not to dial has become the question. And LinkedIn came out with a report recently that over 60% of salespeople consider cold calling the worst part of their job. However, that data also tells us phone-first sales reps are having nearly 7 quality conversations, as opposed to just 3 from reps who rely mostly on email. So, folks, we're not here to debate whether or not calling cultures are vital to success. We know this to be true. We're here to discuss how to build them and where organizations may be falling short. So to get us started, KD, just understanding your level of experience here, where does it all start? What's the first step to get this ball rolling in the right direction?
Oh, goodness. Well, depends on where we're starting, right? If we're starting from scratch, it begins with your hiring process. If you're not starting from scratch, it begins with your training, right? So there's 2 different paths we can go here. Because if calling is a part of your culture, then you need to be hiring people that are comfortable with that. You need to be hiring people that are bought into that idea and that mindset around things. And so that's the first key, is because, let's get into whether it's dead or not, but there are plenty of industries out there right now that are making plenty of dials every single day. So if you're important to do that, then go target those industries, right? Fundraising is a big one, right? Nonprofits is a big one. Raising money, recruiting, right? Call centers, insurance, all of those things, right, are areas. So it starts with your hiring first. But if you are not starting from scratch, it's going to start with your training. So I'll pause there for a second, but there's a few different ways we can take that question.
Definitely. Okay. And I think obviously hit it on the head there. Overall, something that, we kind of agree with here is that it also starts with leadership's buy-in. I think perhaps you can make the argument wherever they are in their life cycle, it all starts with their buy-in to a calling culture, right? You could have, to your point, the 10 best cold callers in the world on your team. And will they be ahead of the game? Yes, but if there isn't belief from the top in value of dialing those reps, they're eventually not going to feel as empowered, right? They're not going to feel as motivated, supported. And I can almost promise you that they're slowly going to start to shy away from it. So
and what's interesting about that, I'll jump in there, is actually it's less about the top and it's more about the U's. It's the frontline managers, right? Because if you talk to actually most, sales leaders that have been in the game for a minute, that's how we cut our teeth coming up. Cold calling is what we did. And so there's oftentimes a large belief at the top. It's the frontline manager, whether or not they are bought into it, whether or not they can coach to it, whether or not they can explain it, whether or not they will hold people accountable to it, whether or not they will be unrelentingly positive around it. So that's actually the make or break point for a lot of orgs with the culture. It's not the top, it's the frontline manager. And if they are not properly bought in and equipped, I'm going through this right now, even with my own team back and forth as we try to elevate, some of the calling culture that I want. And there's pushback from different managers. And so getting them on the same page is actually my number one priority, bar none.
Awesome. And we're talking cold hard truths today. So on that point, what would you say? And it sounds pretty close to home to you. What would you say to a sales leader who wants to build that calling culture, but knows the team around him isn't on that same page? Can that team succeed?
So yes is the answer, but there's two really, call it three, but there's two really important things. You have to start small and you have to make it non-negotiable. Okay. This is key, right? It has to be non-negotiable. This is not a choice per se of like whether or not we are going to do this. This is a non-negotiable. This is a part of our system, part of our process. But the important part is you have to sell, not tell. I talk about this with my managers all the time. Anytime you're asking your people to do something new, you have to sell them on it, not just tell them what to do. You have to sell them on why. Why is calling a part of our culture? Why is this an area of focus for us? You have to sell them on it, but it's a non-negotiable. It's a non-negotiable there, because the moment there's quote unquote leeway, the moment there's like, well, should I not? Do I have to? Do I not? It's all out the door. So this is a non-negotiable, but the flip side of this is starting small. This is where I see a lot of leaders go wrong. And when I say a lot of leaders, I mean myself included. I have messed this up where I say, screw it. Next month, y'all, 100 dials a day, 5 call blocks. We are like da-da-da-da. And it's way too big of a jump. And so it pushes people too far versus 10, then 15, then 20, then 25. I'm going to build people up to it over time versus going too deep too fast. So I'll pause there, but those are the two big keys. It's non-negotiable. This is not a conversation on whether we will or we won't. This is where we're going, but then starting small and letting it build up.
Huge. Baby steps is the key. And part of all of this, I think, whether you're on the IC level, people manager, executive, is acknowledging that yes, this shift will require more rejection. It will be part of that process, right? Like, yes, making cold calls is going to be more difficult than chatting back and forth behind a screen on LinkedIn. It's going to require a different kind of focus and rewired mentality. But I think the only thing maybe we haven't touched on this topic is if leadership can come in with supporting data, right, to justify that culture shift, show how many more at-bats their reps are going to get to hit a home run when committing to the phones more, is going to start to build that buy-in. Where do we start with that data? Where do we grab that?
Yeah. Well, and that's what can be tricky, right? Is if you have internal data, that's a very easy conversation to have, right? Of like, hey, look, like our reps that are doing the best are making calls, or when we have XYZ connect rate, it leads to this many conversations that leads to XYZ many meetings, right? And so if you have internal data, that's like a big one. Now you could try to use external data, like the LinkedIn one, right? That apparently came out. Okay. But I can promise you, what do we got on here? We got almost 200 people on here right now. When everyone heard that, and they could jump in and correct me here, making calls and having 7 quality conversations per day, I bet a lot of people go, really? That's not the world that I'm living in. So you want to be careful using that third-party data, because when people then don't believe it, they're like, I don't need to do this, right? So also so we'll get in further into how to leverage data, but I'm going into teams, and I've done this now 5 times, where we maybe don't have data yet. Maybe we don't have data to support it, but what I can do is, one, I can flip it and go, is what we're doing working right now? Are we getting enough opportunities right now to hit our goals? Yes, then truthfully, I'm going to pick a different battle short term, right? Like I'm going to pick a different battle. But secondarily, it's like if you're sending good emails, more people are willing to talk to you. You make a lot of good cold calls, people are more responsive to your emails. So they work together, which is really important. So there's a few places to use data, but it's making sure that you either use real internal data or you don't rely on external data that people then don't believe, because then it only like hurts your argument even more.
So true. So true. And
But also, actually, I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep going on this because this is also the classic on this, right? Is you cannot fight emotion with logic. You cannot fight emotion with logic. Okay. This is the very classic. Everyone will get my example, right? If you and I were arguing and I say, hey, Nick, calm down. Calm down. It's not that big of a deal. And I try to fight your emotion with logic, it doesn't work. So you mentioned it, over 60% of reps believe cold calling is the worst part of their job. That's not logic, that's emotion. And so if I try to fully counter just with data, I'm not addressing the emotion side of it. And so I know we're going to dive into this a little bit further today, but how to address the emotional side of cold calling is also a big part of this. It's not just the data.
Definitely. And we will certainly get there. That is a huge topic. And this data, it helps set the stage for the justification of this move to a culture, but it also helps to set those baselines for KPIs and activity, right? For your reps, for your teams, to create that predictability of what I need to achieve or what I need to put to input to receive the output I need. And ideally those KPIs back into revenue. And at Orum, we're committed to letting the math of sales drive our activity and our expectations on a daily basis. And it builds this predictability and confidence within each of our reps that, hey, if I have a bad day, all I have to do is trust the process, stay consistent. I know the results will come tomorrow. The data shows that, right? So creating that is so important. I mean, how does that play into the mental game a little bit, of having the data, to back you?
Sorry, there's a dog going crazy right by me right now. Sorry if that's too much in the background. It's the house dog. So I guess, so this is the key around, one second. Can you hear the dog?
Oh, can't hear the dog. Only you.
You can't hear the dog. Okay, cool.
Oh, now.
Okay. Yeah, now for sure. All right. So here's the key on the data side is making sure that you're actually doing enough of it, right? Because this is also where I see a lot of call cultures go wrong is if you don't know your connect rate and you do not know your conversation conversion rate, you don't know how many dials to be making. And so then what happens is a lot of teams out there have these made up call numbers where it's like, Nick, you need to make 60 calls a day. And the rep's like, all right. And there's nothing behind that, right? There's nothing behind that number. So for example, if my connect rate is 3% and my conversion rate is 20%, well, if I make 60 calls, I'm talking to 1.8 people a day. And if my conversion rate is 20%, that means I will get a meeting every 4 days or so. So what happens is I make those 60 dials for 3 days in a row and I don't book a meeting. So what do I think about dialing? Right. So the classic line that I tell people now is as humans, this applies in all walks of life, not just dialing, but we'll do just enough of something for it to suck, but not enough of it to work. So I'll make 60 dials and that's enough for it to suck, but it's not enough for it to work, right? And so we get these activities going, and my callers, you know what I'm talking about here, where you're supposed to make 60, but you make like 42, and you're like, well, it's close enough. Well, based off the connect rates and the conversion rates, you're not going to get there. And it's not because cold calling didn't work, it's because you didn't do enough of it. And so my dialing metrics are based off math and they're based off the individual. So I don't do blanket dial expectations. Okay. I'm very individual. Nick, based off your goal, your show rate, your connect rate, your conversion rate, you're 74. Well, I don't want to make 74 dials. Then get better at them. Because if your connect rate was higher, you need to make fewer calls. If your conversion rate was higher, you need to make fewer calls. If your email response rate was higher, you need to make fewer calls, right? Like it's very individualized in terms of activity, but there's a baseline of what we expect. So I know I threw a lot there, but that's how I approach the data and the expectation side.
Yeah. So insightful. And the fact that you take it to that next level of breaking it down by the individual, I think that's something that so many managers, so many leadership teams just fail to even think about that. So glad you mentioned that. So let's talk objection handling for a little bit. And for once, I don't mean the objections we get from prospects, right? Most of us are fortunate enough, or not fortunate enough, I should say, to just walk into a company with an amazing calling culture, right? It has to be built. Change needs to take place. And no matter how well prepared you are as a leader, with change naturally comes pushback. So how important is it for leadership to get ahead, handle these objections head on and early on? And what are some of the most common objections that leaders can prepare for?
Yeah. So, there's this old cliche quote or idea, right, that says your top salespeople don't make great managers, right? This goes on, and everyone gets riled up about it, like, yeah, see. But what people actually don't realize is if you applied the same skills that made you a great seller to being a manager, you will be phenomenal. The problem is actually people stop using those skills. So think about what it takes to be a great sales rep. Well, you got to have high EQ. Well, that sounds like good leadership. You have to be able to handle objections. That sounds like leadership. You have to be able to sell, persuade. That sounds like leadership. You have to bounce back from rejection. That sounds like leadership. You have to close next steps. That sounds like leadership. Like, it's actually all the same. It's actually just funny. A lot of leaders stop using those skills. So if I look at any change that I am trying to make, I look at it from a sales lens. If I need to sell something, what do I need to do? Well, first step, qualify. Do I have qualified people on my team? Second step, I need to do proper discovery. What's the pain of the now, and what is the ideal future they are looking for? So I'm doing discovery. What is it they want to achieve? Are they on pace for it, or are they not? From discovery, I have to sell, connect the dots back to why we're doing what we are doing, not just telling what, but selling the why we are doing this to the individual level as well. But then also, it doesn't stop there. Okay, I've sold it. Well, salespeople, what do you have to do after you sold something? You did that first demo, you got to follow up. There's a mutual action plan. There's an agreed upon metric that you're looking for. So all of this, yes, you have to get ahead of it, but you also have to sell it. I want to make sure people are getting that part of this. Is this is not just handling the objections. You have to sell this. Why will this make their life better? Right. But then if you think about the common objections you're going to get as a leader, well, the first and foremost is it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So here are things that you need to do. First of all, you need to know if it works. You need to know if it works. I do, and this might shock some people, I do think there are some industries out there that aren't great for cold calling. Based off the data. This is not based off gut. This is just based off the data. If people in specific industries are only answering at 1% of the clip, you got to make 100 dials to talk to one person. That means 500 dials to get 5 good conversations. That is a really hard space to make cold calling work. So I'm going to let the data show whether it can or cannot be. Second, I'm going to look for positive examples in my org, right? But third, and this is actually important, and this, people almost always take this the wrong way. If I don't have anyone calling right now, I'm going to start to make some calls. I will start to make some calls, but it is not for the reason a lot of people think it is. It's like, oh, I'm going to show them that it works. That's actually not what I'm going for. I'm going for, do I know this will work? Not show them it'll work. It's like, do I know this will work? Do I know, or am I actually just asking people to do something I have no feel for if it will work or not? How many dials did it take me? Right, that's what I'm looking for. Is like, all right, if it took me, if my connect rate was 7% and my conversion rate was 30%, well, now I have a benchmark, so to speak, to work with my team on. But I'm looking for examples to show, right, like, hey, I know this works, and here are some examples. Because also, who am I going to put into this? My managers. Right? I'm gonna get them involved in this process too, around, okay, let's go through this. But then here's the next big part is if we're getting ahead, if it doesn't work for a lot of people because they're just not doing it well. They haven't been taught how. And so similarly, I sell the shit out of the script. Like I break it down line by line, the psychology behind it, where it was learned from, how they can make it their own. Like I go deep on it. But the company I'm working with right now, we are rolling out new scripting. It's already showing a positive impact on results already. It's only been like 6 weeks. It's already showing, but I still have to sell it. I still have to keep coming back because there's always going to be some pushback around it. And now we're getting more of those positive examples. But I involved my managers, I involved the reps. We broke it down so they know why the script is what it is, as opposed to just saying this is where it goes. And then third, around all of this, y'all, right? You think about objection handling. The biggest objection that no one's willing to state is they don't feel comfortable doing it. They just don't feel comfortable. They're afraid, but they don't want to say they're afraid. Well, what solves fear is confidence. How do you build confidence? Repetition with positive feedback. That's the only way around it. Is they need tons of repetition in practice, not in the game, because this is also where people will go wrong, is they'll just throw their people on the phone. They haven't been trained how to do it. So they make 10, they have 7 conversations, they get rejected on all of them. They're like, deuces, I'm out. Right. So I think those are 3 of the big steps of like getting ahead of the issues and making sure things are going well.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And I think we're gonna double click into that, because you're right. I think the most common pushback that reps are going to give toward a transition like this is exactly that, around call hesitation and apprehension, because it's scary to them. It's not comfortable. So this takes us into building a psychologically safe environment for our reps, tackling call hesitation head on, confidence, building that. It's a huge part of it. Can you tell me a little bit more about, how you've helped teams address that hesitation, create that safe space?
Yeah. So I'm gonna have us light up the chat here, right? Because I don't know if people are still with us or not right now. So I'm gonna ask people to do this in the chat for me. Okay. So for everybody listening, what does it take to get good at something? Anything. What does it take to get good at anything? Think about a sport, think about music, think about art. What does it take to get good at anything in life? Okay, so I'm seeing now we're okay, good. We still got some people here we got some people. So you got practice, time, repetition, commitment, okay, 10,000 hours, right? Meaning doing it over a period of time, coaching, dedication, failure. So, and then there we go. Richard got the last one. And what good looks like. What good looks like. So if we break this down, you got to ask yourself, all right, well, first of all, do you have what good looks like for your team? If not, it's not a safe space yet. 2, are they getting a lot of practice, right? Remember, practice is the safe space. Now, that doesn't mean practice is easy. It just means it's a safe place to fail, right? So are they getting enough practice? Most teams are practicing on the prospect. That's where most teams practice, is on the prospect. And that is the worst place to be practicing. So first, do I have what good looks like? Second, am I practicing it a lot? Third, am I getting the repetitions in practice? But then fourth, am I getting the feedback, right? Am I getting the feedback to make me better, right? I have been building teams for the last decade. I've had the blessed opportunity this past year to get involved with almost 70 different companies over this past year through coaching and advising and consulting, and not a one had a practice culture in place. Not a one. And then we wonder why people don't feel confident in here. They don't feel confident. That's what creates the fear, right? Whereas if we can make it good in a safe space, that's the key to all of this, right? So I'll pause there for a second, but that's where I see most of our psychological safety. They didn't create it because it's not safe. And to my sales leaders on here, failing does not teach someone how to succeed. I'm going to say that again. Failing does not teach success. It just makes people afraid of doing the thing they failed at. Just because you got rejected doesn't mean you learned a new way to do it. All you learned is you got rejected and you make a cold call. So safety is created through practice and repetition. And to any of my former athletes out there, you know exactly what I'm saying. You practiced hours and hours and hours a day to get ready for that game. And we get into sales and we don't, right? But then the last part on safety is to feel safe. Truthfully means to feel cared for and loved, right? So how much positive reinforcement is your team getting? How much positive reinforcement? Because y'all, sales leaders, sales, I'm speaking to your soul, because I've done this and messed this up. We will ask our people to make 70 dials, and then they do it and they hear jack shit from us. I'm looking into your souls right now, sales. We will ask them to do it, they do it, and they hear nothing from us. Someone will use the script the way that we want to, but just because they didn't book a meeting on that call, they hear nothing from us. You have to positively recognize the behaviors that you are looking for from your team. That's what makes someone feel safe. Because y'all, I'm gonna light up the chat again here. So what's a good conversation conversion rate? Meaning if you get 10 of your ICP on the phone, how many of them should say yes to a meeting? So if you're cold calling and you get 10 on the phone, how many of them should you get to say yes to a meeting? All right, what's a good conversion rate? Here we go. We're seeing some numbers here. So I'm seeing a lot of 2s and 3s, right? So now here's where we got to flip it, y'all. That means you can do everything right. And how many are still telling you no? You can do everything right. You can use the script the right way. How many are still telling you no? 70, 80%. But when do we give people recognition? Nick, to even think about your day, you're on here with me, so I got to talk to you about it. When do we give recognition?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully as much as possible. When you want to recognize the right behavior, right?
Right. So that's the point I'm making, is they could be doing the right behavior 100% of the time, but we only give them recognition 20% of the time when they book the meeting. That is not a safe space. A safe space is, hey, Elizabeth, I just heard that call. Your tone and your opener were exactly what we're looking for. Keep it going. Yeah, but I didn't book the meeting. Yeah, I know. Keep doing what you're doing. It's going to lead to the meetings, right? Because also now I'm going to talk to the sales reps for a second. I already spoke to the souls of the sales leaders. I'm going to talk to the sales reps now. Y'all also know you will try it once, it didn't work, and you'll try to switch it on the next call. Salespeople, I'm speaking to you now. You will try it once, it doesn't work, and then you switch it on the next call. That also doesn't lead to success. You have to do the same things repeatedly to get to the results that you're looking for, right? So that's where safety comes in. Practice, repetition, positive feedback, what good looks like, and then recognizing the behaviors you're looking for outside of just the results.
Huge, huge. My goodness. Thank you, Katie. And, feeling safe, it goes hand in hand with, to your point, feeling supported. Right. And a study came out from Sales Health Alliance, where sales reps are 87% more likely to succeed and feel like they're doing a good job in the sales process when they're supported by their leaders. Surprise? No. But I think the difference here is to feel supported is different than to feel comfortable. And I think that's something we got to hit on, because as I'm a Washington Commanders fan, we had a new offensive coordinator come aboard last week, and he said this so beautifully: comfort is the enemy of progress. There is no growth without discomfort. So I guess just double clicking into this just a little longer, how can we as management and leadership create this type of supportive environment without it being comfortable?
Well, I mean, so think about this, y'all. Think about the best coach you've ever had in your life. I want everybody to think about the best coach they've ever had in their life right now. Just think of who this person was. Was that person tough on you or easy on you? I want everyone to think about this. The best coach you've ever had in your life, were they tough on you or were they easy on you? Okay. Anyone that's had a great coach, right? Okay. Tough, hard, whatever, right? Now, and I love how Marilyn broke this down, okay? The only difference between tough and hard is the level of care they also show for you. If you know someone cares about you, that toughness is accepted. When they don't know you care about them, that's when it's hard-headed. That's when you're just the asshole, right? So they need to know that you care for them as people and as individuals, right? So knowing their goals, knowing where their energy is at, all of those things. So it's so important that we are touching in to that around like, hey, that care for them, connecting the dots to what they are trying to achieve. But I cannot stress enough how important positive recognition is around building this type of culture. Most leaders don't do it. We ask people to do things, they go do it, and they hear nothing from us. They only hear from us when things go bad, right? Because I don't love the word support, because I think it's so easy to twist, right? Like, what does it mean to support somebody? What does that mean, right? Whereas like to care for, to recognize, to coach, to develop, to me, those are better actions then support, because support, like if, and truthfully, y'all, most leaders on here, if we had opened with, do you support your team? I bet most people would have said yes. Then if I flip it and go, are you regularly practicing with your team, regularly giving positive recognition to the behavior, not to the result, and connecting dots back to those individuals' personal goals? It's a different answer there, right? That's what I focus on to make sure people feel safe within it. And now again, safe does not mean it's not challenging. We're going to challenge each other. We're going to push each other. Those practices are going to escalate in difficulty. Okay. And I saw a couple of questions coming up. We're going to talk about how to do practice the right way, because I think that's a big part of this. But those are the things that we're going for here.
Huge, huge. And yes, well, let's get to that next. I think the only thing I want to hit on and just close that loop there, something we talk a lot about internally at Orum is leading with empathy and genuine curiosity in our conversations with prospects. Speaking to the managers out there, do the same with your reps. Right? Try to understand their situation. Be curious about their life, their interests, about their professional, personal goals. You can be a guide and resource, to a safe environment, as Katie's talking about. It's best built on multiple levels. And, I'm glad to hear that. I think there's some agreement here, Katie, that it's okay to be professional and get personal, right? And that's how I've built such strong relationships and buy-in with my teams over the years. It sounds like it's the same for you.
100%. And y'all, this is the blessing and the curse of having a brand, right? Y'all can look me up. Y'all can look me up. You can see what people like about me. You can see what people don't like about me, right? That's all out there for people. You will not find a soul out there that says KD was easy to work for. Not one. You will not find a single person that says KD is easy to work for, but you will have the vast majority, 70, 80% saying, like, damn it, I knew that dude cared about me. That is unquestionable, right? Even the people that didn't like me, it'd be very hard for them to say, nah, he didn't care. That's not you. That's where it all comes from. That's what allows me to be tough on my people. That's what allows me to push and go for another level, because the reason I'm doing it is out of care. It's not out of self-serving. It's not out of selfishness. It's because I care about you. I want to see you succeed, right? So I think it's just so important to address in all of this is, like, as a leader, you're leading people, right? Anyone that's a leader right now or aspiring, write this down. You lead people, you manage processes. You lead people, you manage processes. People are unmanageable, period. You lead people, you manage processes. And that's what a lot of this is about.
Huge. Okay, so fantastic stuff there. Let's take your advice and talk a little bit more about how to correctly, practice the craft. And I know, at Orum, there's multiple ways we do this with recurring call reviews, where we'll pick a topic, whether it's an objection or a specific industry theme, whatever it may be. We'll listen to some great ideal call recordings, right? We'll share feedback on what we like, then we'll listen to some that need a little more improvement, share feedback as a team. It's a fun experience. And then the most important part is we break out into breakout rooms, and we pair up and we practice what we preached in that moment over and over and over again until it sounds natural and genuine coming from that rep, with scripts to guide us, which I'm glad to hear you're a believer in scripts as well. Like, you got to get out of this mindset that it's cheating. Like, scripts are okay. Right? I know it's out there. It's out there. So I guess take me through some of your best practices for exactly that. Practicing, right? Perfecting the craft.
Yeah. So most reps can't stand role plays because of how they are run, and rightfully so, right? If you think about this, how many repetitions do most reps get during a role play session? How many repetitions do most get? It sounds like y'all are doing it differently, but how many do most get in a role play session? They're getting one repetition. Now, here's where it gets really bad, though. How many repetitions do they get with the feedback?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes 0 repetitions with the feedback. So did they actually get better? They did not. They didn't actually apply the feedback yet. So they get 1 repetition. And leaders and reps, you can answer this too. How much feedback do we tend to get after a role play? A lot or a little? You role play with your manager. Do you just get like a little bit of feedback, or do you get like all the feedback.
It's nuts.
Wow, I'm actually surprised on the amount of people that said a little. Generally, most of the times when I'm sitting in, they get all the feedback, right? Like, okay, you got to fix this, 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 which also most of the feedback is negative, right? So think about this. The rep comes in, they don't know what the practice session's going to be. They're going to get a ton of feedback all at once. They don't even get to apply it. Most of that feedback is negative. It's not positive, and they weren't allowed to prep for the session. And leaders, y'all know this, a lot of times when we're running a role play, we're not practicing, we're testing. And y'all know exactly what I mean. We're not actually in that session trying to make them better. We're trying to test and see what they can do. That's not a practice. That's a scrimmage. That's totally different. So the key to a great practice session, step one, you've identified what skill you're working on. And y'all write this down. The call is not the skill. The call is not the skill. The call is the game full of a lot of little skills. So the call is not the skill. You have to pick a skill. Maybe it is objection handling on a specific objection. Maybe it is the opener. Maybe it is the, the might make sense or the value prop, right? It's like, what's the skill? And then you are going to high repetition chunk practicing just that skill, right? So for example, let's say Nick and I are working on the not interested objection, right? Listen to my calls, game film, because also remember this, y'all, the only reason you listen to game film is to know what you're going to practice. That's it. The only reason you listen to game film is to know what you're going to practice. So I listen to Nick's calls, find out he's getting a lot of not interested too early in the call. I realize that it's tone related and his permission-based opener is just not where it needs to be. So now when Nick and I sit down to practice his tone and permission-based opener only, how many repetitions are we going to get in 30 minutes? Think about this real quick. How many repetitions are we about to get in 30 minutes if we're just working on the tone and the permission-based opener? Okay, we're getting 10, 15, 20 repetitions. And then this is where it gets fun, y'all. Do you think he's actually going to get better in this session? So he does it once. I'm going to give him one piece of feedback, right? One. Nick loved it. Try this on the next one. Here we go. Loved it. Try this on the next one. Here we go. One piece of feedback. He applies that feedback on the next one. What am I about to say? That was great. Do it again. So he does it again really well. What am I about to say? That was even better. Let's do it one more time before we add something else. He does it again. He's now nailed it 4 times in a row. Now I can say, Nick, you've got this. Now let's add this. How is Nick going to feel at the end of this session? To all the people attending right now, I want you to think about how is he going to feel by the end of this session? He got 7 to 10 repetitions. He's going to feel like he's achieving. He's going to feel like he's learning. He's going to feel confident. He's going to feel dynamic. You notice this safe space in here right now that we just created? Okay. Like that's how you run a practice session, is the skill chunked down. And then also what we called it at my last org, we called it TIWIC. So TIWIC stood for this is what you know. This is what you know. So we also made the practice real. So if I was practicing with Nick, it'd be like, what's an account you're trying to get into right now? What's an account you're trying to get into right now? Who's that VP of sales? What's their name? Oh, their name is Laura. Okay, so Laura is the VP of sales at Superviz. What's the last email that you sent her? I sent her this email last. Okay, so we're going to reference that in our conversation. We make the situation real, right? This is what you know. And then the last point on practice is if I know the skill and the scene, if I'm practicing on Thursday, when do you think I'm letting the rep know what we're going to be practicing, Nick? If we're going to practice on Thursday, when am I sending the skill and the scene to that rep?
Man, I mean, for me, I'd send it right before.
I send it on Monday.
Monday, yeah. You give him.
I send it on Monday because remember, Nick, this is key. The role play is not a test.
Mm-hmm.
I want them prepared for this. Don't you want your reps prepared for the real call?
Love it. Heck yeah.
Okay. We want them prepared for the real call, but then we don't let them prepare for practice. Now, what do you think that rep does for most of that week leading up to that practice, Nick? They know on Thursday, we are working on the not interested objection and a permission-based tonality. What do you think that rep's potentially working on for that week leading up to that session?
Huge.
Okay, so that's the key. So now the rep was able to prepare. They feel confident coming in. They know they're going to leave better. They've listened to other examples leading into us because they want to be good in the session. That's how you run practice, y'all. Practice is about skills and drills. It's not about testing people. You don't you don't practice getting blindsided. You don't practice rolling your ankle. You don't practice taking an uppercut. But then in sales, that's what we do. We want to see if they can think on their feet. You know, the best way to think on your feet, Nick, is get really good at the fundamentals, because then you're not thinking. Everyone seems to forget this. The only way you can pull off that trick play, the only way you can pull off that crazy layup is because your fundamentals are so good that you don't need to be thinking in that moment to pull it off.
Beautiful. Talking about practice here. I love it. I love it. These are fantastic points, Katie. Thank you so much. And it's time flew by. I mean, there are so many other talking points, but we've hit our stopping point, and I know we wanted to leave some time for Q&A. So, Katie, my man, thanks again for being here, having such a transparent conversation. I learned a ton. I'm sure our audience did. Any last words or comments you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, and then we'll get into the questions. I do just want to bring it back to tracking the data properly, right? Like I think we maybe breezed through that one enough. If you're not tracking connect rates right now, and you are not tracking conversation conversion rates right now, you are missing out. You need to know those numbers, because truthfully, y'all, right? We opened with this idea of like, is cold calling dead? Cold calling is not dead, but outbound prospecting is dying. And what I mean by that is it's getting harder and harder and harder. You used to be able to make 30 calls a day to get to your number. That's not the case anymore for most industries. It is just not. You need to be able to do a little bit more to get there, right? So I do think we have a lot of teams out there where like they're still applying, 2015, 2017 dial metrics, when the reality is connect rates are half of what they were 5-6 years ago. And so it's making sure that the numbers that you are asking your team to make are built off math. And you might find out you need to be doing more. You might find that out. And that is where you're going to either have to look into tooling or skill building, or ideally both, right? Because y'all got to remember, a fool with a tool is still a fool. Doesn't make any difference if you're going to make 300 bad dials. They're still bad. You got to get good at it, right? So I think that was something I wanted to make sure that we touched on. You have to track connect rate. You have to track conversion rate, so you know how many dials you need to be making in order to get to your goal.
All right. Boom. Thank you so much, Katie. I think we'll have Laura hopping on to help with our Q&A.
Yeah. We got some questions coming in. So both Zach and Tucker are kind of talking about the same thing here. Zach wants to know, do you have any suggestions on how to best create a script? And similarly, Tucker was saying, do you have recommendation on tools for building a call script?
So I haven't come across any tools to help me build a call script, but the tools that help me make the call script, right, are going to be like my call recordings, right? So using something to record the calls, right? So that you know what's working or not. So that's always my first step, is I'm going in, and I literally did this at my new company that I just joined, bench.co. Okay. You know what calls I listen to first? The best calls. Who is succeeding? And I'm trying to identify what is it they do, right? What do they say, and what do they get the prospect to say? So the first thing I'm looking at is like the successful calls we are seeing. Can I break down the patterns? Can I see how do they open? What is their tone? What questions do they ask? How do they handle the objection? How do they ask for the meeting? What do they talk about? The flip side, though, is when you're writing a script for real, and this is where most people go wrong with script writing. When you're writing a script, you want to think about, what do I need to get them to say, and work backwards. What do I need to get them to say and work backwards? You don't write the script from the beginning, you actually write it from the end. So obviously the first thing I need them, this is a good cold calling, I needed them to say, yes, I'll take the meeting. Okay, so then what do I need to get them to say before that? Well, they need to agree that this is worth looking into. Well, what do I need to get them to say before that? Well, I need to get them to say that some things are not ideal right now. Well, what do I need to get them to say before that? That there is a problem. What do I need to get them to say before that? That it's okay to ask my questions. What do I need to get them to say before that? So I actually work backwards and craft the questions that I'm going to ask along the way. Right. So that's the key to building a really good script is it starts with the questions you're asking, leading them up to that point. So I'm taking that combined with what good looks like in the field, combined with, psychology and the things that I study and all the things around it. That's how I build a great script.
I think just a small thing, I know we want to give time for other questions that add on to that. Keep it simple, right? I think a lot of managers, when they're building their playbooks, their scripts, they get drawn into creating these eloquent, creative scripts keep it simple, right? So that's all I'll say there, right? Keep it simple, stupid. Laura, what else we got?
So Shara has a question. It's very specific, but I think we could talk about it sort of wider. So Shara works at a small boutique land and project development firm doing sustainable construction. So where would you suggest people maybe in different industries who don't necessarily have the data to find out if cold calling is going to work for them? How would you suggest people go about figuring out if a cold calling culture might work?
Yep. So here's how I'd approach that, truthfully, is you plan for a week of cold calling, right? So it depends on how big your team is. But let's say you've got 3 people. So you got 3 people. And for 5 days, all 3 of those people are going to make 70 calls a day for 5 days. Okay. Well, that's going to give me 210 calls a day across 5. I'm now over 1,000 dials in that week. That's going to give me enough data points to start with. So the key is, and this is really, especially if you're starting to build a culture, you build up to it, right? You say okay, this is coming. We're going to get our leads ready. We're going to practice. We're going to go through it. Is it going to work? We don't know. And to Nick's earlier point, I'm actually getting ahead of that. Hey, y'all, we're going to try this. Is it going to work? I don't know. But we're going to commit to this for 5 days and see what we can learn. So I don't trust any third-party data with what I'm doing with my teams. I'm going to go in there and, this will sound like a plug, y'all, but truthfully, you want to learn quickly. That's why you bring in a tool like Orum. And that's not a plug on it. I go and get paid jack for that. You're going to get more data points. You're going to get more data points quickly. I saw this happen in the chat. What if you only got one person? Well, you need that one person to be putting out the output of 4 to 5, right? So that's how I would approach that one is take a week, train up to it, build up to it, get the calls ready. So then 5 days of X amount of calls, you're going to learn very quickly what those data points are.
Awesome. Another question here from Andrew. What other skills should be on the list of items to practice other than the permission-based openings or the response to not interested?
Oh, goodness. I mean, everything. I know that's a very bland answer, but if I think about the core skills of cold calling, you have tonality, you have your opener, you have your might make sense, you have your value prop, you have your gap questions, your bucket questions, the key objections, the asking for the meeting, and the confirmation. Those are the core skills of any cold call, any industry, any persona. Now, what those skills look like for your orgs will be different, but those are the key, right? And generally speaking, we don't make it to the end of the call because things go wrong in the beginning of the call. So that's why the permission-based opener, and we don't have time to go into it. My permission-based opener is very different than the whole, you got 27 seconds and all that. That's not what I do for my permission based, but it's the opener with the right tone, getting into the bucket question, into those gap questions. That's where I focus most of my training. And then the objections, what do you do? Not interested. We already have somebody, bad time. Those 4, if you master those 4, you will already be in the top 10% of sales dev and cold calling anyway.
Awesome. Okay, we got tons of questions. Great questions,
Oh
everybody.
yeah,
Thank
I
you
was
for sending
popping
these
now.
in.
Here we go.
Yeah. Okay, so this is sort of similar from both Marilyn and Mari. Marilyn asked, what are some ways we can start to introduce a calling culture from a training perspective for frontline managers? And then Mari similarly was saying, what suggestions do you have to push the leadership to support/drive a calling culture? I can influence my team, but it would be more helpful to have the whole sales department on board to drive more of a practice culture.
Yeah, so I guess there's two parts of that, and I can split this into two. So I'm gonna go with Mari's first. Is if you are a team, right? If you're a team within a larger org, make this like your differentiator. Like make this a point of pride, right? So like I don't love pitting teams against each other, but god damn it, be like, yo, you see everyone else here? They're not picking up the phone. They're afraid to pick up the phone. Not Team Mari. That's not how we get down. So it's identifying that, like that real culture of like, that's actually your unique identifier. We don't even want you on this team if you're not willing to pick up that phone. Like, this is how we do things. So you create the culture of your own team, Mario. Like, this is what we do. And we're actually going to show all these email only cats how we get down. And that what we do produces more. Your team produces more, Mario, over the phone. You will actually be that what's the word I'm looking for? Shoot, there's a word, Nick, help me. Like the thing that's, I don't know, the thing that starts it, whatever. There's a powerful word I wanted to use there. I couldn't find it, but hopefully that answers it, Mari. And then someone else's question around this is this need, yes, there we go. Catalyst. That was the word. There we go. Like I was like, I know there's a word, just can't find it. Right. And so then for the others, is like the introduction of this is built into the calendar. So when I talk about non-negotiables, guess what my teams have already started doing? Daily practice. Daily practice, 10 to 15 minutes. Guess who I got pushback from? The managers. Guess what I made non-negotiable? Daily practice. Guess what we started doing 3 weeks ago? Daily practice. Guess what we're starting to see? Higher conversion rates, higher revenue. Guess who's bought in now? The managers. When you make something non-negotiable, right, and we work on it, they start to see it. And it was so fun. I was talking about this with one of my directors. Like, you could start to see it. Deals are starting to pop. Conversion rates are coming up. The manager's starting to say, like, what's changed, y'all? They're like, honestly, it's actually been the daily practice. I thought they were going to hate it, but they're loving it. They're enjoying the feedback. They're getting better. That you build it into the calendar. You make it a non-negotiable.
Awesome, great. Okay, we got a question here from Jonathan. It sounds like it is best to hold reps accountable to different metrics based on a combination of their skill set and data. What advice would you give to an org creating a range of acceptable KPIs? He says specifies around Orum use. Thanks for the plug, but I think we can make that more general. So yeah, what advice would you give to an org creating a range of acceptable KPIs for their reps?
I'm not sure if I fully understand the question, so I'm gonna try for it here.
Okay.
It's like, because what's acceptable is very dependent upon your org, right? Your org and your targets. So it's hard. Maybe I'm just not understanding the question here, but like, so for example, if I'm using like an Orum, well, I will obviously know my calls per day. I will know my connect rate. I will know my conversion rate. If you're using dispositions the right way, you should also know your number one objections and where calls are getting stuck, what types of personas seem to be answering more. But that's where I'm setting like my benchmarks of like, okay, this is what I'm looking for. Now I'm blessed to have been in this space long enough that I know like what good numbers look like. Like I know my best SDRs can convert about 35 to 40% on conversations. Like I know that, right? I know that I can get my teams to average about 25 to 30. Like I know that. I know if I'm below a 5% connect rate, something's wrong. Either my data is wrong, my emails are wrong, the number of touches I'm making is wrong, or like when I'm calling is wrong. So like those are things that I look for around it. But it sounds like, if you have an Orum, you're going to have pretty much everything you need already.
Awesome, cool. LV wants to know, what's the hardest objection you found or your reps have encountered, and how have you become successful at overcoming it? And they've like, is it not interested? Is that the hardest, or no time? Is that the hardest? What's the hardest objection, and how would you deal with it?
So it's defining objection versus rejection. Not interested, more often than not, it's not an objection, it's a rejection. Because more often than not, the not interested happens like super early in the call. So it's just a rejection. It's not even an objection. They haven't even heard anything yet to be not interested. in, right? And so that's the one that I think is the hardest, because it also like it hits you in your gut as a salesperson. Hey, Laura, this is KD over at Orum. I was, actually I was just on your, I'm not interested. You just get like slapped with it. You never even got a chance to get into it. And a lot of times reps will just fold right there. They're like, oh, okay. And then call's done, right? That's one of the hardest ones, right? And so those are things where it's like that one there, if someone hits you with the not interested early, a lot of times it's taught, people say like, oh, well, what are you not interested in? To me, that's so confrontational that I've heard it. I've heard very few examples of that actually working, where someone goes, well, okay, tell me what you do. I flip it the other way and I hit them with an agreement statement. Someone says, I don't have time for this. I'm not interested. Well, of course you're not interested. Otherwise you would have called me. I actually agree with the statement, right? I agree with it. Well, of course you're not interested. Otherwise you would have called me. I was actually hoping to ask 2 or 3 questions to see if it's even worth a larger conversation. Would that be okay? Right. So I lean into it, right, around it, and I get that agreement statement. So that's the best way. At the end of the day, y'all, you're not going to get everybody. At the end of the day, you're going to deal with assholes on the phone. Personally, I tell my teams to fold and fold hard. If someone is actually being aggressively negative with you, I tell them to get off the phone. Like, fight another day. If someone's like, how did you get my number? Do you have a soul? You know what? You're right. I'm sorry. I was just trying to help. You won't hear from me again. I was only trying to help you. I apologize. Pause for that 1 second, because oftentimes the apology actually pulls people in. But if it doesn't, I teach my people to hang up on the prospect. I am not there to force you to fight someone who's being a dick on the phone. Not at all. Get off the phone, shake it out, live to fight another day.
And Nick, I liked your comment in the chat. Do you want to expand on that at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly why I called it. Something we preach at Orum. I mean, just to have that blanketed across any objection, you can pretty much make that work. But specifically with not being interested. Hey, Kitty, that's exactly why I called. I didn't expect you to be interested. I wanted to share a little bit more about what we do and see if I can get you there. Right. See what value we can bring to your team. So using, that's exactly why I called, with tone, with emphasis, right, with enthusiasm, but not overly enthusiastic. Yeah.
So Nick, because you're a data guy and all this, test it with the agreement and see if it makes a difference. Because I actually noticed a difference. Like, I very similarly, that's exactly why I called. When I added the agreement, of course you're not interested. Right? Versus that's why I called, which made it about us. Of course you're not interested. Otherwise you would have called me. That pivot worked really, really well. So just something to test, right? And with all this, y'all, every example that we're given, test it for yourself, and go through it.
Well, you got it. We'll be testing that this week. You hear more reps? It's coming for you.
There you go.
Awesome. All right. So we're at time. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us. Great conversations. Loved your feedback in the chat and awesome questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. I just want to say thank you, KD, for all your knowledge and expertise. And thank you, Nick, for driving this conversation. Oh, thank you, everybody in the chat. You're the best. Okay. But yeah, I hope everybody has a great day. Any final words, Nick or KD?
Oh man, just keep fighting the good fight, y'all. I know it's not easy out there. Sales is the grind, but the reward is great for those who embark on the sales journey. It's there for you. Get out there and take it, y'all.
Okay. Practice your craft. That's all I'll leave you with. Practice your craft, y'all. Get good at this, and it's amazing. You can make fewer dials the better you are at it. So deuces, y'all. We out.
Thanks. Bye. Have a great day, everybody.